Hello, guys. Good evening. Come in, come in. It's Tuesday, and I've got a special guest with me. And I've heard from a lot of you today about the Castle SEL program. We've been talking about this for a couple of months now, and we're very fortunate in that we have a guest here that's going to speak about this. It's a former educator, Mr. Jason Littlefield, and I want to tell you what he's doing now, just to give him the big power intro. He founded a company called Empowered Ed Pathways, and I just fell in love with what they're doing, the definition of it. He's kind of creating an alternative path for the regular social emotional learning, as we have talked about Castle. And what he's doing is this: he's empowering educators and students and communities by strengthening neural pathways to peace and resilience through mindfulness and social emotional learning. I fell in love with what you're doing because my husband is a neuroscientist. He got a PhD in neuroscience and really, did a lot of brain science of the way that, mirror neurons work and things like that. And also, I myself have been through trauma and terrorist attacks, etc., and have actually started my own yoga studio after I went through my second terror attack. And because yoga and fitness and all this technically saved my life. So the mindfulness is important. So with that, Jason, thank you for coming on tonight.
Thank you for having me.
So you and I have been talking about Castle SEL, and how did you become aware of that type of program? And tell us a little bit about your background as an educator and what you saw.
Okay. Well, I just finished up year 21 as a public educator. And for the past 7 years, I've been a social and emotional learning specialist, working in the school and working with the Castle framework. And so the Castle framework, there was just the big shift. There was a big shift this past December. They changed the traditional definition, which was social and emotional learning is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And that's what I signed up to do, 7 years ago, I saw SEL as this framework that we can actually cultivate some good skills. We can cultivate empathy. We can cultivate compassion. We can teach resilience. We can really fortify the individual. I thought that's one of the reasons I left public education the first time I did, was because there wasn't anything to really help the individual. So I saw SEL and the Castle framework as what this is. But then in December, Castle officially changed the definition to be transformative SEL is the process whereby young people and adults build strong, respectful, and lasting relationships that facilitate co-learning to critically examine root causes of inequity and to develop collaborative solutions that lead to personal, community, and societal well-being.
We're going to get that up on the screen. So I'm going to put this up there so that we're big into showing and not telling. And we're about to get that up from Castle that you're talking about. And I want to be very clear. We have been very open and critical about the transformative SEL because, again, you're exactly right. It sounds wonderful, warm and fuzzy. And then really when you get down to the brass tacks, it's nothing more than critical race theory.
And really, even more than that, it's critical theory in general. That's the whole, one of the other things that I'm looking to do, Sloan, is really kind of shift the critical race theory conversation to which framework and which worldview is best for solving issues for race issues, injustice, and harm. Is it human liberalism, or is it this new postmodern neo-Marxism? Like, I feel that that's the conversation to be had. And with the definitions of transformative SEL, it's clear to see that that the Castle SEL framework has shifted from a framework that values the individual to a framework that sees the individual as the problem.
Correct.
And it's this collectivist political ideology. I mean, it's clear as day that that's what it is. So another thing that I'm hoping to do is to really provide people an option, and to call out the Marxism in the air and in the room, and for what it is, and allow people to disassociate and separate themselves. And hopefully people that are on school boards, superintendent's office, campus administrators can really understand that the whole critical race conversation and what's actually not conversation, it's just kind of fruitless back and forth, is actually a tool for postmodern neo-Marxism, which is just a philosophy and idea based on destruction.
Well, it's cost, not only that, we know Marxism has cost thousands, millions of lives, really. I'm going to share another screenshot with you guys. Let me just explain. In North Carolina, actually, we've got chapters everywhere. And so we've got Illinois on the line tonight. We've got California on the line this afternoon. But they're all battling back top down. I want you to understand this, top down SEL. So this comes from some from the federal government, some from statewide. And so they're training this and making it a mandate that even if local districts wanted to not do this, there's very little discretion that they have over this. So I'm going to put this up because this is exactly what you're talking about. And I don't know how to make this bigger for you guys, so I'm going to read it to you. This is from our North Carolina website, and this comes directly from their implementation plans. This is how North Carolina plans to outlay this SEL. They're asking, how are our SEL vision mission currently communicated with respect to equity, justice, and anti-racism? When you hear the words anti-racism, it sounds wonderful. That's critical race theory. I want you to know, understand that, and never believe me. Look it up for yourself. Anti-racism, ding, ding. That's the code word. Another, focus area 2. How is adult capacity for addressing equity, justice, and anti-racism developed? Now, part of Castle SEL is actually training the parents. This is a huge component of this. Jason, did you see that when you were an SEL specialist in your school district?
No, not training the parents in this way, but I do also want to note that in my 7 years of being an SEL specialist, the infiltration of the ideology has been kind of slow, but really was noticed probably about 3 years ago. And about 3 years ago, I went to individuals on my team, and I was like, hey, these trainings and things that we've been attending, this is rooted in like Marxist philosophy and what the Frankfurt School scholars set out to do and what Marcuse set out to do. This is what it is. It's right here in our midst. And that feedback was not well received, and those conversations really never happened.
Oh, that's a shocker. It wasn't well received. That's why we get along so well. I say a lot of things that are not well received about SEL. You know why? Because it's the truth. I want to drop some more truth on you. This is right out of Castle SEL. This is extremely troubling and demented. SEL is devoted to, check this out, I'm not making this up, this is on the DPI website right out of Castle, engaging in identity exploration and coming to a resolution regarding one's identity. They're talking, folks, about gender identity. This is not, our schoolrooms are, and of course, this is a transgender student right here. In our public schools, this is not a place to deconstruct identity and to really groom students into becoming something that they're not. Jason, did you see any of this stuff in your training?
No, I did not. But what's interesting there is the coming to a resolution regarding one's identity. So just thinking about that in a very broad sense, we get out of school at 18, right? Our identity, who we are, is not complete when we're 18. What I am seeing is I'm seeing a lot of confusion from students regarding identity, because there is such this push about what is your identity, who do you identify, and all of these, that's driving confusion for kids because they believe that they have to land on one of these identities, and they see who gets treated good and who gets treated bad. So what I am seeing is a lot of student confusion, especially sixth grade girls. And I do believe that that's even like a national trend. So that's one of the reasons I started speaking out, was because I noticed that this movement, the ideology, is actually impeding social and emotional growth. And it's fueling shame, it's fueling resentment, it's rewarding those seeking power, those seeking victimhood, the intensified tribalism. It's because it's designed to tear the individual apart and to tear Western civilization apart. And I see it on an individual basis, and I also see what it's doing to relationships.
Well, the troubling thing here is what we're seeing, and maybe this is a change since you've left, but really, when we think of Castle SEL as the engine, the gasoline, that's the Panorama survey. So the preferred vendor for Castle SEL is a company called Panorama, who the Zuckerberg-Chan Foundation gave a tremendous amount of money into funding, and it's invasive surveys that are in North Carolina, at least, actually in Illinois and a couple other states. They're given without parental knowledge or consent. Now, that's, of course, a violation of FERPA. What's terrifying is that they're using invasive surveys, psychiatric surveys, to gas up these SEL programs. Was this a part of it when you were around?
No, but what I do believe that the district that I just left, that they are adopting Panorama next year.
Okay.
Yeah, there have been some of those conversations about that particular vendor.
Well, right here, I can tell you a couple things, Jason. Right here, we're seeing that, in North Carolina, at least, and what I want to encourage you all to do tonight, go on to the State Board of Education's website. Everything that you need, most everything that you need to know is right there. So I believe in getting evidence, direct evidence of what's going on, and usually it can be found on the district's website. You need to check that out at the state level. That will tell you a lot. So this right here says, use data for continuous improvement. North Carolina is creating state level SEL data evaluation plan to include mapping existing student outcome and adult implementation data. We will develop strategies and tools supporting SEL implementation for continuous improvement using a problem-solving model. Now, data-driven stuff is not bad. I mean, come on, it's 2021. We can all use that. When it's run by Facebook, when it's using the same strategy as Cambridge Analytics to prime the pump of political awareness for students, right, and being done without parental consent, that's the objection that we have.
Yeah, that's one of the shifts, like with the definition, and even this use of data is a shift. That was, I know, years ago when I first started SEL and with my team, that was one of the conversations that we always had, was we're like, no, this is not to be measured. This is not for adults to evaluate students and to do that. So to see SEL from completely shift its intention and to change gears like this it was so shocking to me that I walked away from my job without having another job.
Amazing.
So that was because I was like,
Amazing.
I cannot advance these ideas. I cannot do this. I cannot be responsible. And I know there's other people out there that are interested in building up rather than destroying. So I'm seeking to find those people that are looking to build up as well.
Well, I mean, what's wonderful about you, and the reason why I wanted to have you on is because there is a sentiment out there from parents and from people who we can understand. I mean, they become jaded. They're thinking that, wow, all teachers are behind this. All of them are doing this. They're all left wing. They're all whatever. I mean, you're not left or right, which is why I love you and what you're doing. But there are, and I keep saying this because it's absolutely true. There are so many teachers out there who are absolutely standing up to protect their students and to push back. You took the ultimate sacrifice. You canceled yourself. I mean, I can't think of any bigger sacrifice that you made for students than to cancel yourself, no backup, but you knew there had to be a better way. And that since there wasn't one out there, you were going to derive one. Can you tell me about the process? Tell me about what you're doing now, what you're hoping to do, because I want to get involved. This is a great project. Yeah.
Okay. Well, immediately on the horizon are a couple of virtual professional development workshops to where we really go into explaining what is happening. I want to, one of my aims is to provide clarity, to really draw that distinction between what is human liberalism, like how valuing the individual, and then how this ideology is going against that. So we kind of get into a little bit of the theory and a little bit of the human condition. I also talk about how this movement actually intensifies acts of prejudice, aggression, and cruelty. Which
tell me more about that. Tell me how that shows up in Castle SEL.
By promoting group individuals. I mean, not group individuals, groups, identity groups.
Intersectionality.
Intersectionality is hyper tribalism, essentially. It takes those primitive human tribalism instincts and it hyper accelerates those. And because of that, it cultivates the human capacity. And Sloan, we all have that. You have this, I have this. My 95-year-old grandmother has the capacity for prejudice, aggression, and cruelty, because those are traits designed to keep the body alive. But they show up in very nasty ways. And whenever we see somebody as an other, and especially as an other that we are in a rivalry with, then the propensity for prejudice, aggression, and cruelty, which is where racism and bigotry live, that comes out. So, and the intersectionality is the 1989 Crenshaw's essay, but it was based on the Frankfurt School scholars' ideas of forming multiple groups and uniting them against a single oppressor, because they believed that was the key to revolution. Because prior to that, there was no unified revolution between, a proletariat versus the bourgeois. Like that didn't happen in post-World War I Germany. And even the Bolshevik Revolution wasn't a united proletariat.
You know why that is, Jason? Because if you can get, it's not one side. If it's a binary choice, you have to be forced. But if you can get 12, 15, 20 groups, then they never know when it's them, right? They never know when the mob will be turned on them. And that's why people who are afraid of being called a white supremacist or afraid of being called, a racist or afraid of being called a homophobe or whatever these things. That's how they suppress us and intimidate us.
Yes. And, along those lines, also what I realized was that in 1927, Trotsky was the first one to describe people that spoke out against the party as racist. Like that was a tactic he first employed in 1927. And I've gone to, over the past 6 years, I've gone to many diversity, equity, and inclusion workshops and conversations. And I've noticed every single trait of Western civilization is what's deemed white supremacy. So I feel that if people can just realize that that's not who you are, that's just what this movement, this ideology uses and says, and the lies that it builds on. So if enough people stand up and say, no, I'm not that, in fact, I had a conversation with a very extremely woke colleague that decided to part ways with me because of my pro-humanity movement. But I explained how being a liberal is not a racist. And by liberal, I'm just talking about somebody that fights for the rights of the individual. Like I want people
Classic liberalism.
Classic liberalism. Just fighting for classic liberalism, because I've studied, the social sciences and evolutionary sciences for the past 29 years, and it seems like the classic liberal framework over time has liberated humanity and increased prosperity. Now, there is still corruption within that system, of course, because that system is full of humans. But at the same time, the other side of the ideology, the ideology that's so popular today, more than 100 million people were murdered in the 20th century alone.
Yeah. So, absolutely. I mean, and I'm showing this again because I think it's critical, is that, look, this is nothing more than psychological manipulation at its absolute worst. This is the plan. This is North Carolina's plan. Their words off of the North Carolina Department of Instruction website. North Carolina is not unique by any means. So every state, I want you looking into this, like we always talk about in our chapter meetings. This is deconstructing students' identities and rebuilding it with something that the state wants. Let me explain this to you guys again. Always remember this. The schools, public schools, that's an agent of the government. So by what authority does the government get to deconstruct the identities of children and in its place construct a more apt identity that the state wants? This is the state trying to destroy the individual to put in its place something else again. And it's nothing more than the state trying to take away your children. Because, excuse me, I've got a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. Their identity are my children. That's their identity. The people that are in charge of helping them shape their identity are us and our rabbi, thank you very much, and no one else. So who the hell does the state think that they are? They have no authority to do this stuff. They have no authority to gain information about our children to be able to use against us. They're turning children into spies against their own families, and without children even being able to understand that.
That's true. And I feel the key essential there is that it's an attack on the individual. I heard you use the word psychological manipulation, because it's to break the individual.
Yes.
The essence of the ideology.
Children, by the way.
Children. And the essence of the ideology is, if we can just break the individual, then there'll be a utopia. And that is, I don't see how any responsible educator can advance that idea.
No, they cannot. And how many millions have died in the name of just exactly what you said?
More than 100 million in the 20th century alone.
So Jason, what we have shown tonight on the screen, this isn't Jason and Sloan making up things. This is actually from Castle, and it's from the state of North Carolina's own website. So that's where it comes from, right? I have a tendency when people say things and write it, you ought to believe it, right? And so
Yeah.
your perspective is very unique because you've lived it. You've walked out of these trainings. And so how do you recommend other teachers who find themselves in the same spot as you did? What can they do?
Find community, find others, have conversations, and also speak up. Speak up in a kind and compassionate way and try to understand. And what they may find, I don't want to give people faulty advice, but more than likely they will find an absolutely unwillingness of people to engage in conversation. And if they can find somebody to engage in conversation, then ask them, who do you think has the moral authority in society? Is it the individual or is it the group? And if it's the group, which group? Because I feel that if more people can just take the debate, take the conversation back to, okay, so I'm starting with my foundation of political philosophical belief, and that begins of where do I give the moral authority? Does it go to the individual or does it go to the group? And go from there. You know,
I like that. And so you know what you just said. And by the way, I'm posting, Jason, I'm posting your link right here to your organization. What you just said is absolutely true. When you do speak out, you may be an army of one. You're going to be like that guy at the wedding who starts dancing when nobody else is dancing, and an hour later you've got everybody on the dance floor with you. So but when you are talking to people who disagree with you, and we do it all the time, to be respectful, what I've always found it to do as a benefit is to always ask a question instead of saying, hey, you know, this is wrong and how dare you. I have found it a little bit easier for me to do what you just said and say, hey, what do you think about all this data being collected on students? And then leave it there. Mm-hmm. And then allow people the freedom and give them the respect to come to their own decisions. Because, you know, after you ask a few questions, in other words, if your reservation is they're collecting data or they're psychologically manipulating, turn that from an accusation to a question. Mm-hmm. That can go a long way towards opening the door to get people to do their own thinking and to do their own research.
I agree. And it's also important for people to know that the tools that we're being given right now are purpose for destruction. You know, I don't hear enough people talk about like what is critical theory. You know, I hear CRT is bad, CRT is good, but no really discussion of what exactly is critical theory. So I like to break it down that it is basically taking a problem, any problem. With CRT, the issue is race. So you see the issue in every social structure, in every human relationship, in every human interaction. You always see the problem. It's not a matter of if the problem's there, it's how it showed up. So you see the world in this most awful way, and then you simultaneously think about utopia. Like, that's not a problem-solving tool. Because also with the ideology is once we start thinking about problem-solving, because rational thought and reason is one of those things that is considered white supremacy. So
correct. And being on time, by the way.
So with critical theory, you're forbidden to solve the problem. We're only exacerbating the problem. So that's one element that we've been given, is this tool of critical theory, which is not we're never going to fix anything with any critical theory. Critical gender studies, critical queer studies, critical economics. None of the critical theories that was invented. It was his idea in 1937, right? Horkheimer invented. He was like, you know what? I can give people in a Western society this tool, and over time, they're going to engage in this constant cynical criticism, and they'll destroy themselves from the inside out.
Well, and it's not philosophically based. So the tradition of arguing is revered and of rhetoric. That's completely, and it's something that we should all learn. But there's no. It's not that there's no right answer. It's that if you ask questions, you will be shot down, canceled, censored, and so it is a fascistic.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no model of inquiry. In fact, it's anti-intellectual. Now, you may know, I'm sure you do because you're an expert, but in the UK and in France, teaching any form of critical race theory is outlawed because they don't want a society of dummies.
Right.
And they don't want a society that tears itself up from the inside out. Now, us, on the other hand, Biden is pumping copious amounts of federal funding into this state, into North Carolina, for critical race theory. And we have people at the state level who, instead of acting as a firewall, they're just calling us liars for looking at the state level and just pumping it through. And I'm telling you this, guys, because you're going to have to do your homework. You're going to have to look and see what the federal grants are being used for. You're also going to have to look to see what's going on at the state level. So, Julie, you're absolutely right. At the district level, do get elected, do try to get onto the school board. But I'm telling you right now, when it's coming in and what we're talking about, Jason, the SEL, Julie, this is coming in from the state level. And that means if Julie is on the school board and she's kicking ass and she's like, I'm not going to have this in my schools, state level is going to go, oh, yes, you are, because our federal grant and funding depends on it. That's what I'm saying. This is a state level. This is Jason, this is Common Core from hell.
Wow.
Exactly. SEL is Common Core from hell. In fact, I want to show you, this will blow your doors off. Let me show you a graph that's going to get you. So what we're talking about, Jason, SEL is a movement, just as Common Core is a movement. Bill Gates is absolutely behind it, as he was with Common Core, to the same kind of players. Okay. And so maybe when you came off the field of play, this wasn't like this. In other words, schools could opt out or whatever, and then the decision was made at the district level, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's still not great, but how do we argue with municipalities deciding what their own education is going to be? We can't. So I have this for you. And Sherry just said, I'm just putting this comment up. Stand together, don't back down, have each other's back. 2 words for you, damn straight, right? That's what Jason and I are doing tonight, is standing together. This is North Carolina, and this is the 3rd through 8th graders' performance on reading and math. So we call that reading and math literacy, okay? So in 2010, the state of North Carolina, the Board of Education, they made Common Core, which is basically education from the top down. They made it a thing. So they made it a thing right about here. See where the star is? Right up above here. And then do you see what happened to the scores for every color? Took a nose dive, you guys. So they took the power out of the hands of the local district for the most part. Now, see this red star right here? 2019 is when North Carolina signed on with Castle SEL. Again, this is a top-down program, and it is in every single subject: English, math, homeroom, actually, every subject. So check this out. Here we are now with SEL, which is just like Common Core, but as Jason outlined, it's Common Core from hell. Now, based on this, how do we expect scores to be? Why do you think they're talking about abolishing standardized testing? I mean, no matter what your feelings are about standardized testing, to me, it seems like a damn good way to, conceal the fact that this is a way to dumb down students, and the psychological damage is going to be epic.
Well, it's an attack on meritocracy. Like hard work. So what you just said fits in line with that, because I've gone to many trainings that claim that meritocracy is racist. So by
Well,
getting rid of the test, and seeing what's happening to student performance, K-12 nationwide, you can see what's happening.
well, funny that you mentioned the meritocracy. 3 weeks ago, we reported that the Department of Instruction here and the Board of Education decided that instead of relying on the age-old practice of student performance, students' aptitude, and a colorblind, merit-based way to get children into the gifted and talented program, they were going to allow for a color-based program, an equity-based program to include students in the program. Now, when we reported that, bookcases fell down on our heads. We were liar, we were crazy, we were making it up. But look, the AIG program, it's called the AIG, Academically Gifted Program, is for a type of student that needs extra work or extra whatever, and they qualify for that. So we sat through the trainings that our Department of Instruction actually gave out, and they're training teachers to aggressively, I mean aggressively, recruit students based on their color. They may not even be interested in it, but to aggressively put students in and to switch from a merit-based system to one that is based on color. They did it. They're lying about it. And I would venture to say that other this is happening all over the country, and other, state board of education, they're also trying to obscure the fact that we've gone in this country from a merit-based colorblind system to one that looks at only color.
Yeah, it's like this new postmodern ethno-Marxism, and it's state sanctioned. So
exactly.
I really don't believe that 90%, 95% of educators are on board with this.
No.
I don't believe that most people are on board. I believe that most people do not understand the ideas that they are pushing forth. I feel that most people don't understand that the culture is the dress rehearsal for the political, so that if we are advancing Marxist and collectivist ideas through the culture over the next 10 years, then the political future is just that. And if that is the political future, that's the end of a free humanity. That's the end of an individual pursuing their life in a meaningful way to them, as long as they don't hurt anybody. So we are on the verge of ending that.
Well, I mean, what we have here, members of both parties, quite frankly, have been just kind of, you know what, it's not a big deal. I mean, we're talking about the end of society. I mean, look at, when I travel around and I do a bunch of traveling and I speak, there's three central things that come out. Number one is, wow, our history is being erased in front of our very eyes. Number two is, wow, our personal liberties, they're just disappearing and no one's standing up. And then number three is, how the hell are we going to get out of this? We do not have an analog for this situation in American history. Now, you and I know there is an analog for this in history. It's the Bolshevik education model, which was pre-revolutionary, and then the Mao model, who borrowed from the Bolsheviks. So you and I understand exactly. And whoever is cramming this down understands full well, when you want to turn people against their own country and have them activate against their own country, you will have the type of SEL that we're talking about.
Right. Yeah. And the type that I'm really hoping to create some awareness, hey, there is a pro-humanity. There's a human-centered approach to this that is free of ideology, that is designed to cultivate the most positive attributes of a human being and mitigate those acts of prejudice, aggression, and cruelty. Because if we can practice seeing each other as we see ourselves, and if we can practice intercepting thoughts of judgment and fear towards other and replace those with inquiry and compassion, and really cultivate our self-awareness and cultivate compassion. You know, thinking about neuroplasticity, if our brains are always, if we're always doing that, if we're always being self-aware and we're always rejecting thoughts of judgment, right? And we're always seeing our fellow man as we see ourselves, then
Correct.
neurologically, we're setting ourselves up to where we're not going to harm that person, or we're not going to harm anybody, because we recognize the divinity in everyone. But this SEL is cultivating nihilism, destruction, and tribalism.
Well, and
So
from a neural response, I mean, look, anytime that you are hyper vigilant about what you're going to say, about what someone's going to do to you in this threatening environment, I mean, that releases very harmful chemicals. And what it does is it actually kills the dendrites on the neurons and the hippocampus. And so what happens to memory and learning from a neural background is that you're not able to remember. It impairs your memory. It impairs your judgment. It impairs all that. Now, luckily, there is a happy ending to this story, and that does repair itself. But what you're actually doing with this SEL is you're biologically removing the ability for children to memorize and learn. Your hippocampus, when that's impaired, you guys, you know, that the things that you need to actually do well on tests, etc., that's blown to hell. That's what's happening to children right now in our schools.
And we're enlarging the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, or that strong reaction part of our brain. So we're suffocating the hippocampus, and we're enlarging the amygdala, and we're not accessing and teaching the prefrontal cortex
of being able to have judgment and intercede and impulsivity and things like that. And so when we take a neuroscience, look at this, which is absolutely fascinating. I mean, neuroscience argues against all of this. I mean, there's a wonderful book called Zen and the Brain. It's enormous. And there's an epilogue to that by an MIT professor. And I mean, he's, and I wish I had his name right now. This is amazing what he has done. But I mean, he just shows that meditation, I cannot meditate. I'm too hyper. It makes me crazy. But how just meditation and how being quiet, I mean, he has chronicled study after study where, I mean, better knowledge retention, better, being human to one another, slowing down, impulse control, which is so important to children.
Well, one of the benefits and cool things that, an overtime meditation practice does is it increases the matter of the corpus callosum, which is, our brains are essentially two separate hemispheres. And that corpus callosum is I call it the gooey gump in the middle, but it actually increases the width of that. And when that happens, it integrates the left and right hemisphere of the brain. And when our brains are more integrated, then we're more happy and healthy and productive in our lives. And what abuse, studies of abuse and just this negative thinking, what that does is it actually shrinks the corpus callosum, and it makes us a much more reactive in a negative way type of person versus somebody that is taking in the small points and the bigger details.
Right. And so, and the reason why we know this, guys, is, I mean, I say we, I mean, I did some research back in the day when I went to school, is that fMRI studies are studies that kind of put a subject, when you're testing a subject, a human subject, into an fMRI or an MRI machine, and they're able to kind of detect, once they're exposed to stimuli, how their brain is reacting. So what Jason's telling you is some advanced stuff about how in studies we're able to tell this and to determine what different stimuli does to the brain. And so the fact that you are, kind of developing a cutting edge program that, number one, it makes perfect sense. when if you do anything but what's going on, it's going to be an improvement. But what you're talking about is, instead of using data, using actual science. And that is so much, that's so much better. It's not invasive, and it's actually predictive, because it's, it's based on biology.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it just makes sense to learn the good things about us, our human nature, and the things that we need to really kind of keep under control, because I know that,
and accept that
and
about ourselves.
Yeah, the woke ideology, I think that they claimed that human atrocities began around, the late 1600s. But my understanding of history goes, human atrocities, that's part of day one. Like, and that's that prejudice, aggression, and cruelty that we have. And the classical liberal framework over time has really tamped those evil urges of our humanity.
It's to be celebrated.
Yeah. Now, over the past 50 years, those things have been really under attack, and especially since about 2017, that they've been under attack.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really, Jason, as we wrap this up, I want to celebrate the good news is that we have hero educators such as yourself, and we need to celebrate that.
Thank you. So I cut myself off earlier. I am hosting three-hour virtual workshops beginning next month. And the registration for those is on my website up in the top corner.
I'm going to pop that up right here. And good, I want to talk to you about this. So do you offer continuing education credits, or can teachers apply for that? How do you work that?
So I'm officially recognized by the Texas Education Agency, to where I can, those are recognized in Texas, but I can also just issue certificates of attendance and or work with local agencies. Maybe they would recognize the CPE credits, since the Texas Education Agency does as well.
Okay, this is hugely important, because I know that, roughly 30% of our members, not only here, but around the country, are educators, and they're educators that are looking for a way out. And so we have been looking as an organization for how do we find and support professional development courses that are in keeping with, a libertarian point of view, or a nonpartisan point of view, really, and who work for unity rather than work for discord and Marxism. Right.
Yeah. And I'm trying to work for the individual. My whole goal, ever since I entered education in 2000, I felt that my goal and my mission in life was to increase the human potential of others. How do we increase their knowledge, increase their skill set, increase how we interact with each other, so that they can live as free and happy as they want. And that's the mission that I'm continuing, and learning about SEL, and that emotions are contagious, and that this movement is cultivating narcissism and psychopathy. I'm very passionate about reverse engineering what the Frankfurt School scholars set out to do. And I know that it may take generations, and I may be gone by the time this happens, but I believe that the compassionate humanism framework, the ideas that I've put together, that when individuals and society practice those over and over, then we're going to be a better humanity, and that we can reverse engineer the darkness that's in the world today.
I mean, you're a hero. Definitely. We love what you're doing, and we need to, figure out how to have you continue doing what you're doing. I noticed there's a donate button, so I do want you to consider donating to Jason's organization. Amazing organization.
Yes.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you're doing. I can see us connecting with you, in all of our chapters. And the good news is that Jason, what they're trying to do is what they're doing is they're pushing this off on children. And if you want to see, first of all, I'm a mom, and we had this happen to us in a Jewish day school about 5 years ago. This kind of mental manipulation, and we actually got sued by the Jewish day school when we stood up, tried to be canceled, etc. And so I know I've been, people have tried to cancel us, and so the people that stand up deserve, a lot of credit, because you're swimming against the grain. But my point is that when you're doing this to children, you're going to see moms like me who get superhuman strength to fight back. And we're seeing that all over the country. So this is the most colossal miscalculation of how Americans will react, maybe in recorded American history.
Well, I hope that we can create a groundswell, and I'm very grateful for what you're doing. I've been questioning what's been happening for the past 3 years. So to see that others have been questioning, and that now the questioning of it is out in the ethos, I feel much more comforted. So I look forward to working with you as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for being on this call. Jason, I'm gonna go non-live now with you, and we'll talk offline. But thank you all for coming on. Share this video everywhere, guys. We've got to get the population educated on the dangers of Castle SEL, not only in North Carolina, but everywhere else. Thank you.